In the turbulent theater of World War II, where empires clashed and armies of the world grappled for supremacy, one army stood out for its sheer tenacity in the face of overwhelming odds. The National Revolutionary Army of Chiang Kai-shek, representing the Republic of China, found itself in a grim and relentless struggle against the might of the Japanese Imperial Army. This was an army often deemed the most miserable of World War II, battling internal corruption, a severe lack of modernization, logistical nightmares, and the horrors of Japanese occupation. In this narrative, we will journey into the heart of this beleaguered force, uncovering the reasons behind its misery and the indomitable spirit that sustained it amidst the chaos of a world at war. Tune in. The National Revolutionary Army of Chiang Kai-shek during World War II is often considered one of the most miserable and poorly equipped armies of the war. This assessment arises from a combination of factors including the challenging circumstances in which they fought, internal corruption and inefficiency, lack of resources, and the constant threat of Japanese invasion. In the tumultuous backdrop of World War II, the National Revolutionary Army of China grappled with not only the formidable Japanese Imperial Army, but also the internal demons of corruption and factionalism. As the war raged on, it became painfully evident that these internal challenges posed as much of a threat to the NRA as the external aggressors. Within the NRA's ranks, corruption ran deep. Various warlords held sway from different regions of China, their loyalty to Chiang Kai-shek's central government often wavering and fickle. These warlords, powerful and influential, often pursued their own agendas and sought to expand their personal fiefdoms. The result was a fragmented and unreliable command structure, where orders from the central government frequently fell on deaf ears. Instead of a unified fighting force, the NRA resembled a patchwork of self-serving fiefdoms, undermining the effectiveness of the overall military strategy. Compounding these woes was the relentless Chinese Civil War, which had been simmering long before the outbreak of World War II. The conflict pitted the Chinese Communist Party or CCP against the Nationalist Party, also known as the Kuomintang or KMT. While the common goal against the Japanese invaders might have suggested a temporary alliance, it did little to quell the deep-seated animosities between the two factions. The NRA found itself in an agonizing predicament, forced to allocate precious resources and manpower not only to fend off the Japanese onslaught, but also to engage the CCP in a bitter and simultaneous struggle. This dual-front war stretched the NRA's already thin resources to the breaking point. It was a war on two fronts, one against an external invader and the other against a domestic ideological rival. The combination of internal strife and external aggression made the NRA's position exceedingly precarious, often leaving it in a state of strategic paralysis. As the Japanese Imperial Army surged forward with cutting-edge weaponry and tactics, the NRA found itself woefully under-equipped and clinging to outdated strategies. Japan's pursuit of military modernization had begun in earnest during the late 19th century with the Meiji Restoration. The Japanese Imperial Army had undergone systematic reforms, adopting advanced technologies and strategies inspired by Western militaries. Meanwhile, the NRA lagged far behind, hampered by political turmoil, limited resources, and a reluctance to embrace sweeping modernization efforts. One of the most striking disparities lay in the weaponry at the disposal of the two forces. The Japanese were armed with rifles, artillery, and tanks of superior quality, boasting the latest innovations in military technology. In stark contrast, the NRA had to make do with a motley collection of outdated and often obsolete equipment. Their rifles, for instance, were predominantly bolt-action models from the early 20th century, while Japanese infantry wielded semi-automatic rifles with significantly higher rates of fire. The artillery and tank divisions of the NRA also suffered from severe deficiencies. Artillery pieces were often antiquated, lacking the range, accuracy, and firepower of their Japanese counterparts. Tanks, a crucial component of modern warfare, were in short supply and technologically obsolete. The NRA's tank units were often composed of outdated models or even armored cars, ill-suited for the demands of mechanized warfare. This dark technological gap had profound consequences on the battlefield. The NRA found itself at a distinct disadvantage when confronting the Japanese, who would rain down accurate artillery fire and employed tanks effectively in offensive operations. The NRA's inability to match the technological prowess of the Japanese Imperial Army compounded their already challenging circumstances. In the face of such disparities, the NRA soldiers displayed remarkable bravery and resourcefulness. They compensated for the technological shortcomings with their indomitable spirit, relying on guerrilla tactics and sheer determination to engage the enemy. Despite the odds stacked against them, they stood their ground, becoming a symbol of unwavering resolve in the face of adversity. The logistical challenges faced by the National Revolutionary Army during World War II were nothing short of daunting, owing in large part to China's immense size and formidable terrain. As the NRA grappled with its already substantial internal and external problems, the logistical nightmares it encountered only compounded its misery. China's sheer vastness was a double-edged sword for the NRA. On one hand, it offered ample room for maneuver and potential resources, but on the other, it presented formidable challenges in terms of maintaining a cohesive and well-supplied military force. Supply lines that stretched across this sprawling landscape were tenuous at best. The daunting distances and inhospitable terrain meant that moving troops and equipment to the front lines was a laborious and treacherous undertaking. The Japanese, recognizing the importance of disrupting the NRA's supply lines, frequently targeted them. Ambushes, raids, and sabotage operations became common occurrences, further straining the NRA's ability to maintain a stable front. These attacks not only resulted in the loss of critical supplies, but also sapped the morale of Chinese troops who found themselves vulnerable to constant harassment. Adding to the logistical difficulties was the lack of adequate transportation infrastructure. China's rugged terrain, from vast mountain ranges to dense forests and vast expanses of arid land, made it ill-suited for the development of modern transportation networks. The NRA often had to rely on rudimentary roads if they existed at all, which were easily disrupted by weather, enemy action, or wear and tear. To overcome these challenges, the NRA resorted to utilizing traditional forms of transportation, including foot soldiers and animal transport. Soldiers and supplies moved at a painstakingly slow pace, making it difficult to respond swiftly to Japanese offensives or to conduct coordinated operations. This reliance on outdated methods of transportation not only hindered the mobility of the NRA, but also placed an enormous burden on the logistical apparatus. China's economic hardships during World War II were a critical factor that exacerbated the challenges faced by the National Revolutionary Army under Chiang Kai-shek's command. Long before the outbreak of the war, China's economy had been grappling with a host of difficulties, and the conflict with Japan only intensified these struggles. Before World War II, China had been enduring a prolonged period of political instability, internal conflict, and economic turmoil. The nation was still reeling from the aftermath of the Chinese Civil War, which had devastated its infrastructure and drained its resources. The NRA found itself leading a nation in the midst of recovery, with an economy already weakened by years of strife. The NRA's ambition to modernize its military and equip its forces with advanced weaponry was severely hampered by the dire state of China's finances. The government struggled to secure the necessary funds to support the war effort adequately. Without the financial means to invest in modernization, the NRA was forced to rely on outdated equipment and tactics, further magnifying its disadvantages when confronting the technologically superior Japanese forces. Inflation emerged as a crippling economic issue during this period. Rampant and unchecked, it led to a catastrophic collapse in the value of Chinese currency. This hyperinflation wreaked havoc on both the military and civilian populations. Soldiers found their wages rendered nearly worthless, making it challenging to maintain morale and provide for their families. Civilians experienced similar hardships as the cost of basic necessities soared beyond their reach. The economic hardships endured by China's populace were not limited to inflation alone. The war disrupted agricultural production, causing food shortages and famine in many regions. These dire circumstances only added to the suffering of the already beleaguered Chinese population. In essence, China's pre-existing economic fragility coupled with the strain imposed by World War II created a crippling environment for the NRA. The lack of financial resources hindered their ability to modernize, equip, and sustain a modern army, while rampant inflation and economic hardships further weakened both the military and civilian population's resolve. The Japanese invasion and the atrocities committed during their occupation of China cast a dark shadow over the National Revolutionary Army during World War II. This brutal and relentless onslaught posed profound challenges, both on the battlefield and on the moral conscience of those who had to endure it. From the early 1930s, Japan had been expanding its territorial ambitions in China, leading to full-scale invasion in 1937, effectively marking the beginning of the Second Sino-Japanese War. This invasion placed the NRA in the unenviable position of defending their homeland against a ruthless and better-equipped adversary. The Japanese Imperial Army, with its modern weaponry and tactics, presented a formidable force that the NRA was ill-prepared to confront. The constant threat of Japanese invasion loomed over China like a dark cloud. Cities and towns were bombed, civilians were terrorized, and entire regions were occupied. This widespread devastation made it exceedingly difficult for the NRA to plan and execute effective military operations. Troops were frequently pulled away from their objectives to defend against Japanese incursions or to respond to civilian uprisings against the occupiers. This constant state of flux disrupted military strategies and sapped the NRA's already limited resources. One of the most horrifying aspects of the Japanese invasion was the atrocities that accompanied it. Perhaps the most notorious of these was the Nanking massacre, also known as the Rape of Nanking, which occurred in late 1937. Japanese forces captured the city of Nanking, now Nanjing, and unleashed a campaign of unparalleled brutality. Tens of thousands of Chinese civilians and disarmed soldiers were subjected to rape, torture, and mass murder. The magnitude of the horror shocked the world and remains a painful scar on the collective memory of both China and Japan. The presence of such atrocities not only inflicted immense suffering on the Chinese population, but also profoundly affected the morale of the NRA. Soldiers were driven to fight not only for the defense of their homeland, but also to avenge the crimes committed against their fellow countrymen. This emotional burden added an extra layer of complexity to an already challenging war effort. During World War II, the National Revolutionary Army of China faced a harsh reality when it came to external support from the Western Allies, primarily the United States. While they were engaged in a life-and-death struggle against the Japanese Imperial Army, they found themselves receiving limited assistance, as the Western Allies were preoccupied with the war in Europe and often hesitant to commit significant resources to China's cause. The primary focus of the Western Allies, particularly the United States and the United Kingdom, was on the European theater of the war. The urgent need to defeat Nazi Germany and its allies absorbed the majority of their military and economic resources. This meant that China's struggle against the Japanese, despite its significance in the broader context of the Asia-Pacific theater, often took a backseat in terms of priorities. When aid did arrive from the Western Allies, it was often insufficient to make a significant difference in the NRA's capabilities. Limited military supplies, financial assistance, and training programs were extended to China. But these resources were dwarfed by the immense demands of the war effort in Europe. The Lend-Lease Act, which provided military aid to allied nations including China, was a significant source of support, but it was proportionally modest compared to the needs of China's conflict. One of the most notable forms of aid came in the form of the famous Flying Tigers, a group of American volunteer pilots who flew combat missions against the Japanese in China. While their contribution was commendable, it was just a fraction of the support needed to bolster the NRA's capabilities. The limited external support from the Western Allies left the NRA in a precarious position. They faced a well-equipped and formidable Japanese adversary without the necessary resources to match their firepower and modernize their military. This disparity in support exacerbated the already considerable challenges faced by the Chinese forces. The story of the National Revolutionary Army during World War II is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming adversity. Despite being labeled the most miserable army of the war, the NRA fought on, often against insurmountable odds. Their struggles, sacrifices, and determination ultimately played a crucial role in the broader context of the war in Asia. As the world moved forward, the experiences of this beleaguered army helped shape the destiny of a nation and laid the foundation for the emergence of the People's Republic of China. In the annals of history, the NRA's hardship serves as a reminder that even in the darkest hours of despair, the human will to resist and prevail can endure. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching this far. If you liked the video, give this video a big thumbs up and we will see you in the next one. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more.